Hi, very good morning. I'm Dr. Janak Patel. Today I'm going to talk on a very useful and very important topic, that is acute kidney injury, or in short we call it as AKI. Previously it was also called as acute renal failure, but now that terminology is replaced by acute kidney injury. Acute renal failure is replaced by acute kidney injury. We'll be talking under all these different heading: definition, etiology, pathophysiology, clinical features, investigations, differential diagnosis, treatment, and complications. Now, by definition, AKI is abrupt reduction in kidney function, that is less than 48 hours. There is absolute increase in serum creatinine more than or equal to 0.3 milligram per deciliter. Percentage of increase in serum creatinine has to be more than or equal to 50% of previous, that is it is called 1.5 times the baseline. And reduction in urine output documented by oliguria less than 0.5 ml per kilogram per hour for more than 6 hours. So duration is less than 48 hours, increase in serum creatinine, and oliguria. These three accounts for the diagnosis of AKI. Acute kidney injury is considered as a syndrome where there is sudden decline in GFR, retention of nitrogenous waste products, disturbance in extracellular fluid volume because of decrease in GFR, and because of decrease in GFR, there is disturbances in electrolyte and acid-base imbalance. These are early findings. So, because of acute kidney injury, there is a disturbances in renal physiological functions like impairment of nitrogen and waste product excretion, so they are retained in blood, loss of water regulation, so water is also retained, electrolytes imbalance, particularly sodium potassium, most common. So you start developing retention of sodium and potassium, so you get hypernatremia, hyperkalemia, and there is an acid base imbalance because of retention of H ions, so we call metabolic acidosis. Calcium and magnesium are not much affected, they are affected in a late stage or in a CKD. There are two classical criteria which are being utilized to confirm the diagnosis of AKI and even to stage them, that is called Riffel staging and we call Akin staging. In Akin it is stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. In Riffel it is risk, injury, failure, loss of function, and end stage. So there are 5 stages in Riffel and there are only 3 stages in Akin. Risk means increase in serum creatinine more than 50% and urine output less than 0.5 ml per kilogram per hour for more than 6 hours. This is a standard definition. So this gives rise to what we call as oliguria. While in case of Akin, stage 1, this is equivalent to stage 1 in Akin, which says that there is an increase in serum creatinine by more than or equal to 0.3 milligram per deciliter or more than 50% of original. Injury indicates increase in 100% or equal to in serum creatinine, while urine output, that is oliguria, remains for more than 14 hours, 12 hours, that is less than 0.5 ml per kilogram per hour. Same criteria is for stage 2, that is increase in serum creatinine more than 100%. When you use the word failure, it is more than 200%, and oliguria is more than 24 hours, or there is an anuria for more than 12 hours. Same is stage 3 in Akin. While loss of kidney function means for renal replacement therapy for more than 4 weeks. So persistent of acute renal failure, complete loss of renal function more than 4 weeks, and usually they require renal replacement therapy like dialysis. End stage renal failure means there's a need for renal replacement therapy for more than 3 months, and invariably they go for hemodialysis and later on for renal transplant. There is another way of classifying is called Kidd-Goss classification, that is stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, where serum creatinine 1.5 to 1.9 times the baseline, stage 2 from 2 times to 2.9 times the baseline, and stage 3 is more than 3 times the baseline, or serum creatinine is more than 4 milligram per deciliter and person requires renal replacement therapy, and patient less than 18 years with decreased GFR less than 35 ml per minute per square meter area. So this is Kidd-Goss staging, while urine output criteria remains same as that in Akin or in a Riffles criteria. If we go through the classification, usually Akin stage is very commonly being utilized. Second common you utilize this Riffles staging and then called Kidd-Goss staging. You can divide into AKI or CKD depending upon the staging. Etiology wise, pre-renal, renal or post-renal. Renal is also called intrarenal. Renal lesions can be defined depending upon the etiology, functional, organic or obstructive, and depending upon the urine volume, oliguric, non-oliguric or anuric. We have already done before, oliguria means urine output less than 400 ml, more than 40 ml. In non-oliguric, urine output is more than 400 ml, and in totally anuric, urine output is less than 40 ml up to 0. Another way of classifying is hospital-induced AKI and community-induced AKI. Acute kidney injury we divide into 3 main groups: pre-renal, renal and post-renal, out of which the pre-renal accounts for nearly 55 to 60% of the cases. Renal or intrinsic variety accounts for 35 to 40% of the cases. Post-renal accounts for 5% of the cases. In renal, they are further divided into glomerular, interstitial, tubular and vascular. So out of all this, tubular accounts for 85% and interstitial accounts for 10%. So if we say tubulo-interstitial, which will accounting for nearly 95% of the cases, glomerular is less than 5% and vascular etiology is less than 5%. So indirectly, pre-renal and intrinsic variety in which tubulo-interstitial accounts for the major causes of AKI. Among this, ischemic etiology accounts for nearly 50% of the causes. Nephrotoxic accounts for 35% of the causes. They'll produce tubular damage and interstitial damage. Hypersensitive response, that is accounting for interstitial damage, and infections also accounts for interstitial damage. So if we go through the etiology now, pre-renal etiology is most common, which is hypovolemia, decreased cardiac output, decreased effective circulating volume, classical example congestive heart failure, hepatic failure, and impairment of renal autoregulation while using NSAID, ACE inhibitor, ARB. Sometimes both are used together. Another drug notorious is cyclosporine. So pre-renal azotemia is very commonly because of hypovolemia, we call hypovolemic shock. Second classical group is called defective arterial pressure, we call as a normovolemic shock. And decreased effective circulating volume, that is also called normovolemic shock. Classical example of that is congestive heart failure. While in case of Intrinsic variety, we have already told you that tubular and interstitial accounts for 90 to 95% of the cases. Glomerular accounts for less than 5%, and classical example of glomerular is acute glomerulonephritis. While vascular variety is vasculitis, very commonly in case of a SLE, in case of Goodpasture syndrome, etc. Malignant hypertension, thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura. Classical example of that is hemolytic uremic syndrome, and this accounts for less than 5%. While in a post-renal causes, it is mainly because of acute obstruction, and classical example of that bilateral pelvic-ureteric junction obstruction or unilateral obstruction of a solitary functioning kidney. In tubulointerstitial, ischemic accounts for 50%. Second common group is nephrotoxic, which is accounting for 35%. And in this, the commonest drugs are iodine contrast, or we call radio opaque iodines, aminoglycoside, amphotericin, endogenous products like hemolysis, that is hemoglobin, rhabdomyolysis, which produces myoglobinuria. In multiple myeloma, it is IgM, which can produce a damage, or we call as a myeloma proteins, and intratubular crystals, very rare, not common. And another very common is sepsis, which accounts for ICU-induced AKI, we call septicemia. Rare groups includes abdominal compartment syndrome, where intra-abdominal pressure is more than 20 millimeter, which will produce external pressure on the renal vasculatures and will end up with AKI. Cardiorenal syndromes, where basic etiology is cardiac, which will produce effect on a kidney. In type 1 variety, acute cardiac injury or acute cardiac cause, acute congestive heart failure will end up with a acute renal failure, we call as AKI. In hepatorenal syndrome, liver disorders produces renal involvement, and this is called HRS, type 1, type 2. The most common cause is portal hypertension, secondary due to cirrhosis of liver. The fourth group is hemolytic uremic syndrome, which is very commonly in children following a diarrhea, which is by E. coli organism, and this produces hemolysis plus involvement of the kidney, and that produces uremia, and that's why it is called as the hemolytic uremic syndrome. There is another condition we call the pulmonary renal syndrome, where Goodpasture syndrome, which is genetic etiology, which produces vasculitis, and this vasculitis involves pulmonary blood vessels and renal blood vessels. So they produce involvement of the lung and involvement of the kidney. ICUI AKI is very commonly because of toxins and sepsis invariably leads into modes, and one of the common organ in modes is involvement of kidney, we call as AKI. While in a non-ICU cases, it is because of multiple etiology, which can be anything right from hypovolemic shock, pre-renal, renal, or post-renal. In case of aminoglycoside, amphotericin, etc., you can have a AKI with normal urine output, that is more than 400 ml, and that's why it is called as a non-oliguric AKI. In abdominal compartment syndrome, it is classified into primary, where abdominal compartment syndrome is associated with injury or disease in abdomen, or we call abdominopelvic region, which is classical example is stroma, huge tense ascites, or maybe because of tumor. While in a secondary group, or we call secondary abdominal compartment syndrome, ACS is due to non-originated from abdominal compartment, like external to abdomen, like burns, sepsis, massive fluid resuscitation, etc. And recurrent abdominal compartment syndrome is usually following a previous surgical or medical treatment for primary or secondary, that is following a damage control, laparotomy or temporary abdominal closure is done, and there person develops abdominal compartment syndrome, that is called recurrent ACS. In cardiorenal, we already told you CRS, that is acute congestive heart failure or acute decompensated congestive heart failure, leads to AKI. That is type 1 variety. CRS type 1 variety will end up with a cardiorenal syndrome, which will be AKI, while type 2 will end up with a chronic condition resulting into chronic kidney injury, while type 3 is a kidney injury ending with a cardiac involvement, and type 4 is a chronic renal involvement results into chronic cardiac involvement is type 4, and type 5 is involvement of the heart or involvement of the kidney due to systemic disease like diabetes or maybe sepsis. While hepatorenal syndrome we call as a type 1 or type 2. Type 1 is a progressive impairment of a renal function, that is doubling of initial creatinine, and creatinine goes about 2.5 in less than 2 weeks. And in type 2, there is a stable and slowly progressive impairment of a renal function, and which does not meet the above criteria. So type 1 is cirrhosis with rapidly progressive acute renal failure. Type 2 is cirrhosis with subacute renal failure. Type 3 is cirrhosis with type 1 and type 2 HRS superimposed on CKD or acute renal injury. And type 4 is fulminant liver failure with HRS. These are the 4 types which are being described in hepatorenal syndrome. We already told you in hemolytic uremic syndrome, it is usually post diarrheal hemolytic uremic syndrome, that is diarrhea plus hemolytic uremic syndrome, and the most common cause for that is E. coli infection, which leads into classical triad we call as a microangiopathic hemolytic anemia, thrombocytopenia and AKI, and it is commonly because of cigatoxin produced by E. coli and maybe by Shigella or maybe by Salmonella. Sometimes respiratory organisms like Streptococcus pneumoniae or occasionally viral infections. I've already given you an idea regarding non-ICU and ICU AKI. In an ICU AKI, very commonly it is because of a multiple organ disorders. Most common cause of multiple organ disorders is sepsis, and mortality rate is more than 50%. Non-oliguric AKI, we have already told you aminoglycoside amphotericin B is accounting for the most common causes, and usually prognosis is good or better than oliguric one. Now if we go through the pathophysiology, usually we come across pre-oliguric stage, oliguric stage, pre-oliguric stage will go into oliguric stage, or depending upon the etiology, suppose if it is because of aminoglycoside or amphotericin, it will be non-oliguric stage. Oliguric stage will later on go into diuretic stage, and finally person will go into recovery stage. Either person will recover completely or may develop CKD, which will progress into end-stage renal failure and invariably a mortality. Or person might have some amount of function being affected, we call stage of complications, and good amount of people can recover completely. Recovery is very good in a person who is having pre-renal causes, where if the treatment is given very early, you can prevent oliguric stage. So to break up now pathophysiology, whether it is a pre-renal, which is because of a severe ischemia, which ends up with an intrinsic AKI or pre-renal AKI. There is a defective circulatory volume, because of which there is an activation of a central baroreceptors, which will release angiotensin II via renin system, or we call RAS system. Via acting at the level of the adrenaline, it will release norepinephrine. Acting at the level of the pituitary gland, it will release ADH hormone. Angiotensin and norepinephrine will give rise to vasoconstriction of vascular bed to increase the blood volume and GFR. If hypotension is sufficient enough and if the autoregulatory defense mechanism works nicely, person will reverse back. If it does not reverse back, there is an ischemic injury to the renal parenchyma, And if there is an injury to the renal parenchyma, there will be disturbances, endothelial dysfunction, medullary congestion, tubular epithelial cell damage. All this condition will end up with a reduction in GFR, decreased renal perfusion, regeneration of tubular epithelium may take place, and person might have recovery of GFR if there is an increase in perfusion of the kidney. So ischemia is one of the etiology which will produce vasoconstriction because of RAS system, endothelin, decrease in nitric oxide, prostaglandins, which is going to produce vasoconstriction. And because of vasoconstriction, there is a decrease in GFR and person will develop oliguria. If there is a nephrotoxicity, it will produce a tubular injury. And also because of ischemia, there will be tubular injury. It may be reversible, it may not be reversible. If it is not reversible because of persistence of ischemia or severe damage because of nephrotoxic substance, there is a necrosis, there is apoptosis, and which will produce tubular leak or tubular damage, and that will decrease your tubular flow. While in a reversible cases, there is a chance of recovery because if there is an improvement in the renal perfusion, there is a chance of recovery, and injured tubular cells may start recovering. Pre-oliguric stage will have decreased urine output, may be normal, close to normal, or there may be little amount of oliguria. In a non-oliguric stage, urine output is absolutely normal, or maybe little less than expected normal. In oliguric stage, urine output goes below the expected level, that is less than 400 ml in 24 hours, up to 40 ml, while in anuria, it is less than 40 ml, up to 0 in 24 hours. Because of which water is retained, person will develop edema, hypervolemia, and because of this dilutional hyponatremia and even hypokalemia. Now because of development of acidosis, person will develop hyperkalemia, and because of retention of potassium, person will go into hypokalemic stages. H ion is retained, person develops metabolic acidosis. Urea is elevated because urea is retained and person starts developing uremia. Urea is raised very fast and you will have all the bad effects of uremia. Creatine is elevated, but it does not have any effect on any organs in the body. Sodium is retained, and if during this oliguric stage, if person consumes sodium, hypernatremia will end up. Now, person sooner or later goes into diuretic stage, usually after 2 weeks. In a diuretic state, slowly the water is thrown out, so water loss is there. Urine output increases, extracellular fluid volume decreases. Simultaneously, along with that, potassium is also washed out, sodium is also washed out, so chance of development of hypokalemia, hyponatremia is there. Urea level comes down, creatinine level comes down, H ion levels comes down, and person improves in all the conditions. So person might enter into a recovery stage. Person may recover completely, or may have some function remaining abnormal, we call it a stage of complications, or person may end up with persistence of abnormal renal function, and we call that person is now ending up with a CKD. Later on the function goes on deteriorating, he goes into a stage 5, we call it the end stage renal failure, and mortality rate is very high. Or person from stage of complication can go into CKD stage. Person from recovery stage can directly go into a CKD stage, and person from a stage of complication can recover, possible, but person from CKD can never go back into recovery stage. It is absolutely rare. Person needs RRT. These are the different clinical features which we will come across. So now we are discussing in an oliguric stage. Because of water retention, person is having oliguria and uria, and because of water retention, hypervolemia, and secondary to hypervolemia and sodium retention, person also develops hypertension. Because of nitrogenous waste product retention like blood urea, person starts developing toxic effects of urea, we call uremia. We'll be showing you that slide, and it has got effect on multiple organs right from brain, heart, respiratory system, peripheral nerves, GI tract, skin, etc. We'll be showing you that particular slide. Water intoxication, excess of water intoxication will produce dilutional hyponatremia, which can end up with cerebral edema, pulmonary edema, and even cardiac insufficiency. Means person can have even a congestive heart failure. Because of retention of potassium, it will have effect on a myocardium because of cardiac arrhythmias, and person can even have increased mortality. On skeletal muscle, it will produce weakness and even hyperkalemic paralysis. Metabolic acidosis will produce effect on brain, effect on respiration, person will have a tachypnea, effect on GI tract, on cell producing hyperkalemia. In a brain, it will produce little alteration in the brain function, and fluid retention is going to produce hypervolemia, hyponatremia, and cell edema. Azotemia will have a general effects like fatigue, weakness, pruritus. We call uremic pruritus. On a mental stage, person will start feeling drowsy, irritable. Then he might have a uremic flaps and even seizures sometimes. In GI tract, anorexia, early satiety, nausea, vomiting. In cardiovascular system, uremic pericarditis. Platelet functions are being affected, and invariably person can even develop a bleeding tendency. There is a little loss of protein, and person might develop hypoproteinemia, but this is in a little later stages, not in a very early stage. Calcium phosphorus is not affected, bones metabolism is not affected in early stage, in a late stage. Even erythropoietin is not affected in an early stage, hence anemia and thrombocytopenia are the finding in the late stages. Vitamin D function is also not affected in early stage, it is mainly in the late stage, and even the magnesium is affected in the late stage. In a non-oliguric stage, only finding is urine output is less than 1000 ml and more than 400 ml. Specific gravity is low, but it remains nearly normal, close to normal. And there is a persistence of azotemia, we call urea level is elevated, and person might have some side effects of uremia. But person has got a good prognosis, better than oliguric variety. And acute tubular necrosis can be produced by aminoglycosides, polymyxin, lithium, cisplatin, streptomycin, etc. In a diuretic state, now slowly the person starts developing polyuria. Urine output becomes more than 400 ml. In an early stage, there is hyperkalemia with uremia. But as water is lost, along with that the potassium is also lost. So person might develop dehydration, and if that is not taken care, person can develop acute on chronic. Again, person can go back into oliguric stage. Because of loss of potassium, if potassium level is not maintained, person can develop hypokalemia. Sodium is also lost, so person can even develop hyponatremia. During this stage, there is a little chance of development of the urinary tract infection, and this stage may last for 1 to 3 weeks. So in a diuretic phase, there is increased urine output. Gradually, there is decrease in blood urea and creatinine level. Person has got a very high chance of development hypokalemia or hyponatremia because of urinary potassium and sodium loss. The person, because of dehydration, can develop tachycardia. There is a little improvement in a level of consciousness. which may gradually increase and person starts becoming better and better. From diuretic stage, person goes into a recovery stage. Either person recovers completely within a short period, or person goes into a stage of complication where persistence of some abnormal functions of kidney is there, which can have little effects, or person goes into persistence of renal function disorders more than 3 months. Now we call that as a CKD, and then further deterioration of the kidney function. It can go up to stage 5, we call as an end stage renal failure, and later on the person has got a very high mortality. Because of acute kidney injury, there are a lot of side effects, or we call complications. Huh? Metabolic disorders which can occur because of AKI, like hyperkalemia, metabolic acidosis, hyponatremia. Hypocalcemia and hyperphosphatemia is in a very late stage, particularly when the person develops CKD. Hypermagnesemia is also very common during that stage, and hyperuricemia is also common during CKD stage. As far as cardiovascular is concerned, because of water retention during oliguric stage, pulmonary edema, hyperkalemia will produce cardiac arrhythmias and uremia will produce pericarditis. While pericardial effusion, pulmonary embolism, hypertension, myocardial infarction. Out of this, the hypertension is quite common during oliguric stage, while pericardial effusion, pulmonary embolism and myocardial infarction are not very common complications, but they are usually late complications. As far as GI tract is concerned, because of uremia, because of acidosis, because of water imbalance, nausea, vomiting, person doesn't have an adequate intake, so malnutrition, and because of platelet dysfunction, hemorrhage. As far as the CNS is concerned, because of hyperkalemia, neuromuscular irritability, and even a person develops hyperkalemic paralysis. There will be uremic flaps because of increased level of urea, and seizures because of hypernatremia and because of uremia, very very common. And mental state will be altered. There will be altered level of consciousness because of a water imbalance, that is cerebral edema, because of dilutional hyponatremia, because of uremia, and even because of acidosis. In a late stages, because of decreased production of erythropoietin, anemia, and thrombocytopenia, thrombocytopenia will end up with a bleeding tendency. Because of decreased immunity, there is a recurrent chance of infections like pneumonia, septicemia, and urinary tract infections. Because of increased level of urea, person will develop irritation of diaphragm, which will produce hiccups. Elevated parathyroid hormones will produce hypercalcemia, which calcium will be lost in urine and person will develop hypocalcemia. Low total triiodothyronine level, so person will also develop hypothyroidism. These are some of the findings you can get in oliguric stage, which are very very common in AKI. When you diagnose or suspect AKI, always we go in a following steps. First, evaluate the volume status and try to find out whether the person is oliguric, non-oliguric, or total anuric. And do a physical examination, weight examination, because if a person develops oliguria, he will have increase in the weight because of the water retention. Central venous pressure will be elevated and pulmonary capillary wedge pressure will be also elevated. If person is having hypovolumic stage, fluid challenge will increase urine output, will tell you that it is a pre-renal condition. Always try to rule out obstruction by doing a physical examination, ultrasounds. If required, you can put a catheter, and After catheterization, if there is no urine output, it is an anuric stage, and if the urine output is less than 400 ml, it is an oliguric stage. Try to find out the renal function by doing blood urea, creatinine, electrolytes, hemoglobin, calcium, phosphorus, and even get an ABG done. This will help you to identify whether it is AKI or not. If blood urea is sharply elevated, creatinine is sharply elevated, there is an electrolyte imbalance like hypernatremia, hyperkalemia, it is in favor of AKI. Now to find out the cause of kidney disorders, try to get a good history of drug exposure like NSAID, aminoglycosides. Try to find out the cause of hypotension, get ECG and echocardiography. Get a history of a blood loss in a case of a prerenal, fluid loss, plasma loss, etc. And in a case of a post-renal causes, try to find out by means of ultrasound if there is any obstructive element. Urine examination is a must because it gives a lot of idea regarding whether there is involvement of tubules or not. Specific gravity will be affected because of AKI. There will be appearance of proteinuria. Blood may be present in a case of a glomerulonephritis and nephrotoxic conditions in a tubular variety. Cast will be invariably a findings, classical RBC cast or granular cast or a brown cast they are called. You can go for a urine albumin levels and you can find out urine albuminuria. You can go for fractional excretion of a sodium, it is called FeNA, which will give you an idea regarding where is the damage at the level of a tubules. So it is also very useful in identifying the type of damage in a renal variety. This is a chart which shows you how you go. First, we always try to identify whether it is acute or chronic. Is there any obstructive element? Is the patient is normovolumic and person is gone? That is very common in case of pre-renal conditions. Try to find out the cause of a renal parenchymal damage, and if there is any occlusion, so rule out obstructive element, etc. This is a difference between acute and chronic. In acute variety, kidney size is always normal, while in a chronic, invariably kidney size is small. We call it small kidney. In case of an acute variety, hemoglobin is normal, while carbamylated hemoglobin is very high in a chronic. In case of an acute, broadcast is very common in case of a chronic variety, while it is absent in case of an acute variety. History of kidney injury is usually absent in case of an acute. Hypertension is absent. Abnormal urinarity, urine analysis previously is usually negative, while in case of a chronic, usually there is a history of previous disease like AKI, hypertension, diabetes, and there is always a persistence of abnormal urine analysis. Anemia, metabolic acidosis, hyperkalemia, hyperphosphatemia, calcium imbalance, protein imbalance, hypoproteinemia, abnormal calcium levels, that is hypocalcemia, etc. are very common in chronic. They are usually less in case of AKI. They may be present in late stage of AKI. Reversibility is possible in case of AKI, and sometimes it is completely reversible, while in case of a chronic, usually it is progressive. Very rarely there is a reversal, but that reversal is always partial, but person can never recover completely, and invariably there is a progressive damage and it goes and ends up with an end stage renal failure, and person can end up with a high mortality. So this is the difference between acute and chronic. Again, history is very short in acute, while history is long in a chronic. Hemoglobin concentration is usually low, that is anemia. Renal size is small. Renal osteodystrophy, that is the bone involvement, hypocalcemia and hyperphosphatemia is very common in chronic. Peripheral neuropathy is very common in chronic. and serum creatinine concentration is irreversible in case of a chronic. It does not come back to normal, while in case of an acute, it will drop down very sharply and may be completely reversible. This is a chart which is showing you the way you approach in a case of an AKI. I've already discussed before, so I'm skipping over this particular slide. You can go through later on. Investigation, we already told you, CBC, blood urea, creatinine, electrolytes like sodium, potassium, calcium, phosphates and uric acid. Calcium, phosphate and uric acid will be affected in a chronic or a late stage of AKI. CPK-MB is useful to make a diagnosis in a case of a rhabdomyolysis, tumor lysis or acute urate nephropathy. LDH will be elevated in all those cases. If you want to pick up a case of a tubular injury and glomerular injury, antibody studies like ANCA, complement levels, anti-GB and antibody, etc. Urine analysis is very important because detection of a cast, RBC protein is in favor of a renal involvement. Ultrasound, CT, abdomen, Doppler, plain X-ray abdomen, MR, angiography, etc. will be useful to identify the etiology of renal involvement. Further, like radiography studies, renal biopsy may be very useful to identify the etiology. These are some of the ways in which you can differentiate pre-renal, renal, and in renal acute tubular necrosis, glomerulonephritis, and interstitial nephritis by doing a blood urea creatinine ratio, urinary indices like FeNA, urine osmolality, and urinary sediments. I am not going into tremendous detail. It is little complicated. If you are interested, you can go through this particular chart. Urinary sediment sometimes is very, very useful because if they are abnormal, it indicates certain disorders like RBC cast, WBC cast, pigmentary cast, granular cast, eosinophils present, crystal urea, etc. And if there is no RBC or no WBC cast or a few cast, it is more in favor of pre-renal or a post-renal. While if they are present in an adequate quantity, this is always in favor of a renal variety. You always try to differentiate between a pre-renal, renal and post-renal, and in a renal variety, glomerular, or it is a tubular or interstitial or a vascular variety. Once you make the diagnosis of renal failure, that is AKI, management is volume homeostasis, electrolyte balance regulation, acid-base regulation, and management of uremia. Nutritional management is by means of a change in a lifestyle modification. Dialysis is invariably required in certain conditions. We'll be going through that particular. Prevention of the kidney damage is treatment of the basic etiology as early as possible. Detection and early treatment in a pre-renal will always prevent AKI. Always have a good follow-up for prognosis purpose, whether the person is improving or deteriorating, or person from the AKI is going to stage of complication or stage of CKD. And if there are any complications of AKI, treat properly. So first stage is discontinue all nephrotoxic agents whenever it is possible. Improve the volume status, maintain the blood pressure, maintain central venous pressure. In case of a pre-renal, and if it is hypovolumic, always give a volume challenge. And after giving a volume challenge, if the urine output improves, it is in favor of a pre-oliguric and in a variety of what we call as hypovolumic. Depending upon hypovolumic or a hypernormovolumic, treat accordingly in a case of a pre-renal failure. Consider functional hemodynamic monitoring like central venous pressure. Monitor serum creatinine and urine output. Avoid hyperglycemia. Correct hyperglycemia. Consider radio contrast procedure as contraindicated unless an absolute indication. Avoid radio contrast studies. Non-invasive diagnostic workup like ultrasounds should be done. Check for the drug dosing. Consider renal replacement therapy in certain conditions. And if person is critical, ICU admission. As far as possible, avoid subclavian catheter because to prevent infections. This is similar chart showing you the previous slide, that correct acidosis, correct hypercalcemia, correct hypovolemia, avoid nephrotoxic drugs, replace the fluids, maintain the body weight, see that the person is not developing a fluid overload, nutritional supplements, administer proton pump inhibitors to reduce the risk of upper GI bleeding, prevent intercurrent infections, and if required, given proper antibiotics, etc. So you maintain central venous pressure, mean arterial pressure, and oxygen. And if you maintain this, you can sometime prevent AKI development in a stage of a pre-renal variety. If a person has developed certain conditions, RRT is indicated in the form of a peritoneal dialysis followed by hemodialysis, like oliguria more than 12 hours, anuria more than 12 hours, severe hyperkalemia or we call life-threatening hyperkalemia, severe acidosis where pH has dropped down below 7, uremia where urea level is very high. There are uremic complications like uremic encephalopathy or uremic pericarditis, hyponatremia or hypernatremia, severe hypothermia or hypothermia, drug overdose, and the drug which has produced overdose is possible to remove by dialysis. If a person has developed a severe pulmonary edema, uremic encephalopathy or uremic pericarditis, usually in a uremic pericarditis it is an absolute indications, and in a uremic syndrome also it is absolute indications. While in a volume overload, metabolic acidosis and certain electrolyte imbalance is a relative indications. But life-threatening hyperkalemia, it is absolute indications. And in a case of a severe hypernatremia or severe hyponatremia, it is an absolute indications. There are three classical variety of dialysis you can go for. Peritoneal dialysis followed by a hemodialysis. In a hemodialysis, we call as in a stable, it is called intermittent hemodialysis. And in an unstable, you can go for different varieties of dialysis. These are the different types of dialysis. We call it the intermittent dialysis, hybrid dialysis, or continuous dialysis. Complications which are very common in an AKI is electrolyte imbalance like hyperkalemia or hypokalemia. Hypokalemia is more common during diuretic phase and hyperkalemia is during oliguric phase. Same way hypernatremia, hyponatremia. Hyponatremia is common in diuretic phase. Metabolic acidosis, water intoxication, and secondary to water intoxication, cerebral edema, pulmonary edema, and even acute congestive heart failure. Uremic complications, particularly uremic encephalopathy and uremic pericarditis followed by pericardial effusion. Secondary hypertension is a complication which can be easily managed. Person can go into end stage renal failure following a CKD. CKD is followed by end stage renal failure. Organ involvement due to uremia or acidosis or electrolyte disturbances, and invariably there is a very high mortality. In conclusion, AKI is the commonest complication in a hospitalized patient as a non-hospitalized patient also. AKI has got a strong impact on a morbidity and mortality. Mild degree of renal function may have a negative impact on outcome. Referral criteria is the most common predictor of a outcome and to stage the staging of a AKI. There are promising biomarkers for early diagnosis and outcome predictors. And now there are good number of drugs which are coming during the treatment of AKI, but yet there is no effective pharmacological therapy for AKI. Here I end my lecture and I say goodbye. See you tomorrow.